my name is Emily, and today I would like to talk about Alzheimer's. In this video, I'm going to be addressing a number of things, including what Alzheimer's is, the science behind it, what someone's everyday life is like with Alzheimer's, medical treatments available, and at-home treatments. So let's start with what Alzheimer's is. Essentially, Alzheimer's is a cognitive decline in people who are elderly, and there are early onset cases where younger people might develop Alzheimer's, but mostly it's in the elderly, and it's a cognitive decline due to a buildup of this protein called beta amyloid, and it builds up in the brain, and as you get older, the less your brain is able to clean up the beta amyloid, and therefore these buildups cause this plaque, and then the buildup not being cleaned, it kind of coats your neurons and your brain cells, and then you have these neurofibrillary tangles, and those stop your neurons from communicating, which are the things that allow actions and behaviors and communications to happen. So that's what happens with Alzheimer's, but it is essentially just something that happens when you age, and it's not common. It's not something that everyone's going to get, but it happens. Usually it could be, nobody knows why necessarily that you could get Alzheimer's. They have some theories, some of which is genetics, like you could be more susceptible depending on the genetics that run in your family. Some of it's life experiences, like how you've behaved over your life could affect your chances of getting Alzheimer's. In the sense that a more unhealthy lifestyle, a less brain active lifestyle. Maybe as you got older, you stopped learning new things, stopped behaving in what would be called mentally engaging activities that can also cause you to be susceptible to Alzheimer's. So that's who gets it. It's essentially just, a cognitive decline that happens when you're older, due to multitudes of factors. There are 3 stages of Alzheimer's. There's early stage Alzheimer's, middle stage Alzheimer's, and late stage Alzheimer's. Early stage Alzheimer's is the beginning. You have some brain fog, maybe a couple memory lapses. The person is still able to be independent, and they don't need professional care, but you can notice that there are some things going on that the person would not have been experiencing normally. And then there's middle stage Alzheimer's, and the person starts to need some care. They need a caretaker, maybe not full time, but there are going to be days where they're going to need somebody there with them to look after them. And this is where not only is it brain lapses, but complete memory decline, in the sense that they can't remember their past, they can't recognize people that they know, things like this. And then there's late stage Alzheimer's, and at that point the patient needs round the clock care. Usually people will be put into a facility at this point, or they'll have a professional live-in caretaker. And this is also when your physical abilities start to decline. You have trouble walking, trouble with motor skills, falling down more easily, and then complete, or most of the time, there are good and bad days, complete memory loss in most days. And when I talk about good and bad days, I mean that when you're thinking about what it's like to live with Alzheimer's, it's a spectrum. It's not the same for each person. Every person's experience with Alzheimer's is different, and every day with Alzheimer's is different. There are good days and there are bad days. And when we're looking at good days, the person has some independence, maybe they're joking and they remember things about their past, and they're just more engaged. And then bad days would be the person is a little more recessed into themselves, they're not as independent, they need a little bit more care, and they also can't remember as much. They might not be able to recognize anybody around them, they might not really be sure what's happening or understand what's going on, and on those days when they need more care, you just have to be a little bit more attentive and a little bit more patient. So that's essentially Alzheimer's, and I guess a little bit of what it's like to live with it. So when we talk about treatment, there is no cure for Alzheimer's. There is no magic pill that you can swallow and make it go away. It is a consistent, progressive, declining disease. When you are diagnosed with Alzheimer's in early or middle stage, it is only downhill, unfortunately. You cannot prevent late-stage Alzheimer's. You cannot prevent the disease from progressing. It just does. That being said, while there is no cure, there are treatment options available to slow cognitive decline. There are 2 medications on the market currently you can take to slow the decline of Alzheimer's, or I guess the progression of Alzheimer's, and that would be, and pardon me if I butcher this, but donanemab and lecanemab. And these 2 medications essentially slow the cognitive decline of a patient with Alzheimer's, usually in early to middle stage Alzheimer's. If the patient's already in like late to middle stage, the treatment is not as effective, and it will slow their decline, obviously, but it cannot stop it. And these drugs and then there also are other drugs on the market that can help with symptoms. This could be like the mobility impairment or the memory fog or headaches or dizziness or nausea. There are medications that you can take to help with those symptoms of Alzheimer's. But again, these are not cures. These are not treatments. Unfortunately, they cannot stop the disease. All of this to say that while there is no cure right now, hopefully on the horizon, there have been plenty of tests recently on Alzheimer's. There's been a couple studies and research experiments that have shown that Alzheimer's might be something that we can more in-depthly predict, treat, stuff like that. A couple of these things would be really interesting, actually. They have done some tests on being able to detect Alzheimer's before someone starts to decline through blood tests. They have been able to, in trials, at least in the clinical trials, they have been able to predict people who will develop Alzheimer's through blood tests. So that is promising because, if you know that a patient is going to be getting Alzheimer's, you can take proper steps beforehand or in advance to help them with their process and with their disease in a more effective and appropriate manner. And then there were some other tests as well that not focusing on predicting, but more focusing on treatment. There were some other drugs similar to the donanemab and lecanemab that can slow the cognitive decline, and they were looking at being able to put them with those drugs to stack up 2 drugs and see if that could have even better results or better the patient's quality of life even more. And those were promising as well, but these were all in clinical trials and they have not been tested on a group of real patients with Alzheimer's yet. So hopefully in the future when they do that, we can see if this will be a good way for people with Alzheimer's to receive a better quality of life. And then past medical treatments, we can talk about at home or caregivers treatments, like what somebody with Alzheimer's goes through every day and how we can help them at home. So many people with Alzheimer's are usually cared for by family, friends, or professionals. Essentially, usually professionals are more common in middle to late stage, but in the early to early middle stage, usually it's still family and friends. As the disease progresses, you're going to need more care because the symptoms become more pronounced and the effects are more severe, and so you're going to need more care as the person progresses into the disease, and so that's why it essentially changes. It's important when you're taking care of somebody with Alzheimer's, it's important to keep a consistent routine because while they are changing from day to day with what they can remember, what they can't remember, if they're in a good mood, if they're in a bad mood, while they are changing, if you keep their routine consistent, it provides a level of stability for the person that they might need in these times of stress or anxiety. Because again, while it might be hard for the caregiver, it is just as hard or more hard for the patient because they have no idea what's going on. They don't understand why they can't remember things. They don't understand why they can't recognize the people around them. They don't understand why they can't remember their childhood or why they can't walk properly. It's just as stressful for them, and it's important to keep a stable environment. And then the other thing that you think about when you're caregiving is lifestyle. It's important to ensure that they are living a healthy lifestyle, because the disease is already affecting their brain, and so you don't want to add physical or like other neurological issues on top of that. So it's important to keep active, walks, light exercise, some simple household chores, maybe wiping down counters, or like dusting the tables, or like height level counter surfaces and stuff like that. That would be a good activity. And then diet is really important as well. Ensuring that they have healthy, well-balanced meals and proper like nutrition, because this will help fuel their body and their brain, which they do need during these times of duress in their disease. Home safety is also a very important part of caring for somebody with Alzheimer's and the life of somebody with Alzheimer's, because as I said before, as the disease progresses, physical function declines. And when physical function is declining, you're going to want to ensure that the home is safe. This is things like having carpeting in their living areas, in case they fall or trip. It is a soft surface, guardrails on the stairs, or walking support if they're beginning to lose that ability or becoming a little unsteady or shaky. It's just really important to ensure their safety and comfort above all things. So when you're treating somebody who has Alzheimer's at home, safety, comfort, and lifestyle are of the utmost priority. And then let's talk about the caregiver. Being a caregiver is hard. It's difficult to have have someone else depend on you in such intense and stressful circumstances. And so you want to take care of yourself as well. Maybe this is things like splitting the job. Usually, essentially, there's not normally just one caregiver. There might be 2 or 3 people who can help take care of the person or the patient with Alzheimer's. Maybe seeking support, therapy, talking to somebody about the stress of it. It's important to take care of yourself, because if you can't take care of yourself, how can you take care of somebody with a disease like this? And to conclude, I just want to say that while Alzheimer's disease is challenging, it does not define a person. They still deserve safety and respect and independence, and those are things that you can give them. And it is important to understand that this disease does not mean that somebody is less of a person. And I think this stigma around Alzheimer's just needs to end, because these people are suffering, and it's important that we understand how to help them, how to care for them, how to speak to them, how to treat them. And I think if you take anything away from this video, it should be that you must treat people with Alzheimer's just like you would everyone else, because they deserve respect as well. So, thank you.